Bum 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum. So it is said that everybody who was alive at the time will remember what they were doing when they first heard about 9/11. And I like to believe I'm remembering it accurately, but I noticed a few inconsistencies in my memory. One of my biggest memories on the day of 9/11 was that George Bush was talking to a number of people in a conference room, and he was sitting in a corner, and there were other people, they were kind of sitting on the perimeter of that room. And all of a sudden, they all started to sing God Bless America. That's what I remembered. And the camera zooms into George Bush. But when I went online to look for it, all I could find was Congress singing 9/11 on the doorsteps of, I think it was the Capitol. And for some reason, I don't know if it happened more than once, the singing of God Bless America. I looked everywhere for a video of God Bless America with George Bush in it, and he was sitting in a corner. That's how I remembered it. Maybe one of my viewers can point me to the right direction because I would love to see it again. It would bring me a lot back to my childhood memory of that. Now, something else I misremembered was when I got to see the first plane hitting the tower. We didn't actually see footage of that until September 12th, according to the news. But I seem to remember that day I was going to college part time, and classes were canceled. Obviously, my mom drove me home. On the way home, she stopped at a Joann's Fabrics, if you can believe it, probably to take her mind off of what was going on. And then we went home, and when we got home and turned on the news, it seemed like I remember that video. The firefighters were working on something on the ground. Holy shit! We all know that video now. I could swear I saw that on September 11, 2001, though. That day after we got home from that. That's how I remembered it. Even George Bush himself was mistaken about that. Later on, he was talking about, oh, when I saw the first plane, I thought it was a bad pilot. Only the second one did I realize it was terrorism, right? He didn't see the first video of the first plane, obviously. But I made the same memory mistake as George Bush, so it makes me feel better about that. I also misremembered some of the timeline. Sometimes I'll see an event, and I could have sworn it happened before or after 9/11, and I was completely mistaken about it. At the time, I was a big fan of the television show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. That was a really popular show that year. And I could have sworn the show was canceled for months after 9/11 until like November, December of that year, if not in 2002. I could have sworn. But I go onto YouTube and there were episodes that were in late September of 2001. There were music around the time of 9/11 that I could have sworn was a different year altogether, right? I think the number one song on 9/11, the day of 9/11, was Alicia Keys' of Falling, but I could have sworn that that song was popular at least a year before that. I was it's completely mistaken about that. And so then all the rest, right? So even though I like to believe all the other aspects of my flashbulb memory of 9/11 were accurate, just these inconsistencies alone really make me question what I'm remembering. And that's kind of sad that I have to question my memory. Now, my other big flashbulb memory was obviously the very first time I learned that we had to be 6 feet away from each other. I hope those memories are accurate. They're only less than a half a decade old. What had happened was I was living out of my car at the time, actually. I had a favorite Starbucks that I used to love to hang out. And one day I get there, and there's tape around every other seat. And I learned we have to be 6 feet away from each other. And I overheard at another table somebody talking about, did you hear about the social distancing thing? And I commented that I didn't think this was going to stick around because the mental health aspects of the social distancing, we're going to kill much more people than this so-called disease, right? We had a disease that at the time had only killed like a dozen people in another country. And obviously, health officials knew that it was going to go beyond that. But I thought the mental health aspects were going to kill a lot more people. And then I looked, and the stock market had crashed, and with it, it dragged silver prices down. I wanted to buy a 1,000-ounce silver bar. And I went, actually, strike that. At the beginning, I wanted to buy a 10-ounce platinum bar, but I quickly gave up on that because there were supply shock issues, couldn't get a hold of anybody, and the premium was really high, right? I think platinum had fallen to $500 an ounce, something like that, but you were still going to pay $800-900 an ounce, so it didn't seem like it was worth it anyway. I started looking for silver, and so I placed my order. And next thing I know, the company, it was U.S. Gold Bureau, called me needing to verify various things. Now, the very next day after that, I went onto Airbnb to look for a place to stay while we wait for this thing to resolve, because obviously by this point, my favorite coffee shops had closed and all that. And I got a really good deal because nobody was using Airbnb at the time. And I booked it for 2 weeks because that was all that we were going to lock up for. And then when I got to the Airbnb, I started looking for the documents that U.S. Gold Bureau had asked for. Now I really didn't want that order to cancel because silver prices were already starting to inch up. So I was frantically looking for tax documents, utility bills. I was living out of my car. They were stuffed in my trunk, and I literally had to clean out my trunk, which was really nice. And I sent them in and crossed my fingers. Now, what was really funny about that silver bar was that it was delayed. There were a lot of orders going on. And on the morning of April 1st of 2020, I get an email saying that your bar is on the way. But the email came on April 1st. And it made me think maybe it was a joke. And I didn't believe that the bar had arrived. After hearing about all the constraints and all the delays and all that, social distancing, I didn't want to believe that a silver bar would come at this time. I had ordered it on in middle of March. In good times, it's not going to come that fast, right? 1,000-ounce silver bar, let alone in the times that we were dealing with. So I thought it was a joke. And I get to my mailbox. I have a mailbox at Pony Express. I get there, and sure enough, there's this big box. And I'm thinking it's filled with other things besides. It's not going to be heavy. And so I took both in, thinking I'm just going to pick it up like it was full of air. And sure enough, it's heavy. I still think that maybe they sent me some other metal because it had arrived April 1st after hearing about all the other constraints that were going on. And so I opened it up. Sure enough, there's a 1,000-ounce silver bar in it. And it arrived April 1st. That was just such a coincidence. And then I discovered that even though I scored an unbelievable deal on Airbnb because nobody was staying there, Governor Inslee had signed an eviction moratorium that, among other things, allowed us to continue to pay our rent at the same rate that we were getting, no price gouging. And the landlord was obviously very upset that the circumstance had turned out that way. So I ended up staying another 4 months at the, $22 a night or whatever it was that I was paying. And so I got a really cheap silver, and I got to be an introvert. And so it was all good. I still have that 1,000-ounce silver bar. I'm kind of hesitating on whether or not I should melt it down to make stuff out of it because I recently learned how to cast silver and all that. But all the silver that I have, a lot of sentimental value to it. So there's one that I bought at the turn of the pandemic. There was one that I bought around the time that Trump was elected. And then another one that I bought with a signing bonus that I got at my first job. So it's going to be a hard sell on whether or not I should make anything out of all that silver. So anyways, but it makes me question all of these memories. If I don't have somewhere to back it up, right? That's why I love recording YouTube videos. Right? One of these days, how I reacted to various things, I can point to a YouTube video. This is the Peter Dislike Show. Bum, 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum.